She slept on cold concrete while he worked in luxury just floors above. He walked past her every day without a second glance. But one morning, everything changed when he finally looked down and saw her lying there, barely breathing. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but Joy still shivered beneath her faded umbrella outside the locked shop in Yoba. 19 years old, and already she felt ancient, worn down by 6 months of sleeping on Lagos streets. She pulled her thin wrapper tighter and watched the early morning crowd rush past. Young women her age hurried by in crisp office wear, clutching handbags and phones. They didn't see her. Nobody ever did. Joy's mind drifted back to that terrible day. The police officer at her door, his face grave. There's been an accident on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway. Her parents, gone in an instant. The funeral she could barely remember through her tears. Then her uncle's wife, Patricia, 3 weeks later. Joy, we need to talk about your future. But there had been no future in that conversation. Only excuses. We have 3 children of our own to put through school. Your uncle's salary can't stretch that far. Maybe you can find work, help yourself. Joy had tried. For 2 months, she'd searched for jobs, applied everywhere. But without a university degree, without connections, the doors stayed closed. Then Patricia's patience ran out. You need to leave. We can't keep feeding you when our own children are suffering. That was 4 months ago. 4 months of sleeping rough, of begging for work at the market, of collecting plastic bottles for recycling money. The university admission letter she'd received days before her parents died was still tucked in her small bag, now just a painful reminder of dreams that had died with them. A BMW pulled up to the towering glass building across the street. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, barely glancing around before disappearing through the revolving doors. Joy watched him go, remembering her father's words. One day, you'll be the one keeping the books for big companies like that. She had wanted to be an accountant so badly. Had studied mathematics until her eyes hurt, determined to make her parents proud. Now she just wanted to survive another day. As the sun climbed higher, Joy folded her umbrella and tucked it under her arm. The market would be busy soon. Maybe Mom and Ngozi would need help arranging her goods. Maybe someone would pay her to carry their shopping. She crossed the street, passing the glass building without looking up. Behind one of those windows, a life she would never know continued without her. What Joy didn't notice was the figure on the 7th floor, standing at a window with a phone pressed to his ear, his eyes briefly flickering down to the street below before returning to the view of Lagos sprawling endlessly toward the horizon. Joy's eyes snapped open at 4:47 a.m. She'd learned to wake before the city did, before the police patrols that cleared vagrants from the business district. She rolled up the cardboard she'd slept on and stuffed it behind a dumpster 3 streets away from the glass tower. It would be there tomorrow if the sanitation workers didn't take it first. Her whole life now fit in one small bag. 2 extra wrappers, the useless university letter, a photo of her parents, and a cracked phone that no longer worked. The public tap at the corner of Allen Avenue was her bathroom. Joy waited until the area was empty, then quickly washed her face and arms in the cold water. She'd learned to be fast, to be invisible. By 6 a.m., she was at the Tejuosho market, where the real work began. Mama Ngozi. Joy called out to the elderly woman struggling with a heavy basin of tomatoes. The food vendor's face creased into a warm smile. Ah, Joy. My dear, come and help me. For 2 hours, Joy helped arrange vegetables, swept the stall area, and fetched water. When the morning rush ended, Mom and Ngozi pressed a small bag into her hands. Jollof rice from yesterday. Still good. Thank you, Ma. Joy's voice cracked with gratitude. This kindness, small as it was, kept her going. That your uncle's wife, Mom and Ngozi said, shaking her head. She will answer to God one day. Throwing you out like that. Joy said nothing. Bitterness wouldn't fill her stomach. The afternoon was harder. She roamed the market offering to carry bags, earning 20 naira here, 50 there. By 3 p.m., She'd made enough to buy pure water and a small loaf of bread for tomorrow. As evening approached, Joy headed back toward the glass building. Something about it felt safer than other areas. Maybe because of the security guards who, while they chased her from the immediate entrance, didn't bother her if she stayed across the street. Joy. Sister Joy. She turned to see Brutus and 3 other boys swaggering toward her. Her stomach tightened. Brutus was 17 but had the eyes of someone much older, harder. He ran a small crew of pickpockets and bag snatchers. "We've been looking for you," Brutus said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Smart girl like you, wasting time carrying bags for old women. I can show you where the real money is." "I'm not interested, Brutus. See this one." He laughed, but there was an edge to it. "You think you're better than us? You sleep on the same streets, sister. Same streets. I just want to be left alone." One of the other boys stepped closer. "Brutus is offering you opportunity. Don't be foolish." I said no. Joy's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. Brutus's smile vanished. "You're making a mistake. These streets are not friendly to people who think they can survive alone." He leaned in closer. "Think about it. We'll talk again soon." They walked away laughing, and Joy released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The first drops of rain began to fall just after 7 p.m. Within minutes, it became a downpour. Joy ran toward the only shelter she could see, the awning of the glass building. A security guard spotted her immediately. "Hey, you can't stay here." "Please, sir. Just until the rain stops. Move now or I'll call police." Joy backed away into the rain, water streaming down her face. She was about to run when she noticed the underground parking garage. Its entrance had a small overhang, barely visible from the main entrance. She slipped into the shadows, pressing herself against the wall where the overhang provided just enough cover. The concrete was cold and hard, but it was dry. As she settled in, a car's headlights swept across the wall. Joy shrank further into the darkness, holding her breath. The car parked. A man stepped out, not the owner, but a driver in a neat uniform. He opened the back door, and another man emerged. Even in the dim light, Joy could see his expensive suit, the way he carried himself with absolute authority. The driver said something, and both men looked in her direction. Joy's heart hammered. They'd seen her. They were going to call security, or worse, the police. But then the well-dressed man simply nodded and walked toward the elevator without another glance. The driver, however, stood there for a moment longer, his eyes meeting Joy's across the shadows. Then, surprisingly, he gave her the slightest nod before following his boss. Joy exhaled slowly as the elevator doors closed. She didn't know it yet, but that brief moment of acknowledgement was about to change everything. Richard Daniels stood at his office window on the 7th floor, watching Lagos transform from day to night. The city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds, beautiful from up here, hiding the chaos below. "Sir, the Singapore investors confirmed the video call for tomorrow at 9 a.m., his assistant, Mrs. Adeyemi, said from the doorway. Richard didn't turn around. "Make sure the presentation is ready. This deal could expand our reach across West Africa." "Already done, sir." She paused. "Will you be working late again tonight?" "Probably." He finally looked at her, noting the concern in her eyes. "Is there a problem?" "No, sir. It's just, you've been here past midnight every day this week." Richard shrugged. The work doesn't do itself. After she left, he sat at his mahogany desk and tried to focus on the quarterly reports. But the numbers blurred together. 2 years since his divorce, and he still came to an empty house every night. Work filled the void, or at least kept him too busy to notice it. His phone buzzed. His mother. "Richard, when are you coming to visit? Your father asks about you." "I'm busy, Mama. This new deal. You're always busy. Work, work, work. Is this what we raised you for? To become a machine?" He rubbed his temples. I'll visit soon. You said that 3 months ago. Her voice softened. Son, I know Melissa hurt you, but you can't hide in that office forever. After the call ended, Richard sat in silence. His mother didn't understand. This company was everything he'd built from nothing. While other kids in his neighborhood in Ajagunal had been playing football, he'd been studying under streetlights, determined to escape poverty. And he had escaped. Full scholarship to university. First job at a tech startup. Then his own company at 32. 6 years later, he was one of the youngest self-made CEOs in Lagos. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost something. He just wasn't sure what. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Samuel, his driver, stood in the doorway. Sir, I'm heading home now. Do you need anything? No, go ahead. See you tomorrow. Samuel hesitated. Sir, there's a young woman who sometimes shelters near the parking garage. I saw her again tonight, in the rain. Richard frowned. Why are you telling me this? Call security. I just thought. She seems different from the usual street people. She's always alone, never causes trouble. Samuel, we can't run a charity for every homeless person in Yoba. Tell security to handle it according to company policy. Yes, sir. Samuel's disappointment was obvious, but he left without another word. Richard tried to return to his reports, but Samuel's words nagged at him. At 11 p.m., he gave up and packed his briefcase. The night guard greeted him in the lobby. Good night, Mr. Daniels. Any security issues today? No, sir. Well, just the usual. That homeless woman trying to shelter by the entrance. We chased her off. Richard nodded and walked to where Samuel had parked his car earlier. His new driver, the night shift man, waited by the vehicle. As Richard approached, movement caught his eye. In the shadows of the parking garage entrance, barely visible, someone was curled up under newspapers. He stopped, briefcase in hand, staring at the small figure. Sir, the driver prompted. Richard took a step closer. The newspapers shifted, and he glimpsed a young woman's face, streaked with dirt, eyes closed in exhausted sleep. She couldn't have been more than 20. Something twisted in his chest. A memory, old and buried, of himself at 15, sleeping in his uncle's store when his parents couldn't afford the school boarding fees. The shame of it. The cold concrete. The fear of being discovered. Sir, are you all right? Richard shook himself. I'm fine. Let's go. But as the car pulled away, he looked back through the rear window. The girl hadn't moved, still lost in whatever dreams the homeless dreamed. He told himself it wasn't his problem. Lagos had thousands of street people. He couldn't save them all. Yet when he got home to his 5-bedroom house in Lekki, he stood in his empty living room and couldn't shake the image of her face. His phone buzzed with an email. The security company's weekly report. He scrolled through until he found it. Homeless individual repeatedly attempting to access building premises. Female, approximately 18 to 25 years old. Recommend filing police report if behavior continues. Richard stared at the words for a long time. Then he typed a response. Continue monitoring. No police action yet. I'll review the situation personally. He didn't know why he'd typed that last part. It made no sense. But something about the girl sleeping in the rain, alone and vulnerable, had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't explain. Joy woke to the smell of fried eggs and bread. She sat up, confused, then saw Samuel crouched a few feet away, extending a small paper bag toward her. Good morning, he said quietly. Thought you might be hungry. Joy stared at the bag, then at him. Why? Samuel smiled. My daughter is about your age. I can't imagine her out here like this. He set the bag down and stood. Eat. And listen, the main security guard comes on duty at 8. You should be gone by then. Thank you, Joy whispered, her throat tight. He waved and walked to his car. Joy opened the bag with trembling hands. 2 eggs, bread, and a small bottle of orange juice. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a real breakfast. Over the next 2 weeks, Samuel became her quiet guardian. He brought her food, warned her when security patrols were coming, and never asked for anything in return. "Why do you help me?" Joy asked one morning. Samuel was quiet for a moment. "When I was young, I lost my parents too. If strangers hadn't helped me, I don't know where I'd be." He looked at her seriously. "You're a good person, Joy. I can see it. You just need a chance." But Samuel wasn't the only one noticing Joy. In his office, Richard found himself checking the security reports more frequently. The girl was still there, still alone. He told himself he was just monitoring a potential security risk, but he knew that was a lie. "Mrs. Adeyemi," he called one afternoon. "What's our company policy on charitable giving?" His assistant looked up, surprised. "We donate to several organizations, sir. Education funds, children's homes." "What about individuals?" She studied him carefully. "We don't typically help individuals directly. Too much risk of fraud or dependency." "Why do you ask?" Richard waved dismissively. "Just curious." "Forget it." But Mrs. Adeyemi was sharp. She'd worked for Richard for 4 years and knew when something was bothering him. Later that day, she pulled up the security reports herself and found the mentions of the homeless woman. The next morning, she brought Richard his coffee and casually said, "Samuel mentioned there's a young woman who shelters near our building." Richard's jaw tightened. "Samuel talks too much. He's worried about her. Says she's different from the others." "There are thousands of homeless people in Lagos, Mrs. Adeyemi. We can't save them all." "No one's asking you to save them all, sir." She set down a folder. "Just thought you should know, I was once a struggling single mother, sleeping in my sister's shop with my baby. One person's kindness changed my life. That's all." After she left, Richard opened the folder. It contained the standard security briefing, but clipped to it was a handwritten note. "Sometimes the smallest gesture makes the biggest difference." That night, Richard stayed late again. At 11 p.m., he stood at his window, looking down. He could just make out the figure huddled near the parking garage. The rain started again, a light drizzle that would soon become a storm. Richard watched as the girl stirred, pulling newspapers tighter around herself. Security hadn't noticed her yet, but they would soon. He picked up his phone, ready to call the guard, to finally order them to remove her permanently. Instead, he found himself calling Samuel. "Sir." Samuel's voice was groggy with sleep. "That girl. The one you've been helping. Does she have family?" A pause. "She mentioned an uncle who threw her out after her parents died, sir. No one else." Richard closed his eyes. "Don't call security on her anymore. Tell the night guards to leave her alone, as long as she stays out of sight." "Sir, thank you." Don't thank me. I'm not doing anything. Just tell them." Richard hung up and stood at the window for another hour, watching the rain fall, watching the small figure below, and wondering when exactly he'd started to care. 3 floors below, in the parking garage, Joy sneezed violently and pulled her wrapper tighter. Her head felt hot. Her bones ached. But she told herself it was just the cold rain. She'd be fine in the morning. She had to be. What Joy didn't know was that the fever taking hold of her body was about to force the man in the tower above to make a choice that would change both their lives forever. The world was spinning. Joy opened her eyes and saw the concrete swimming beneath her. When had she fallen? She tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't obey. Hot. Everything was so hot. She heard voices, distant and echoing. Footsteps. Was it security? She needed to move, to hide, but her body felt like lead. Sir, please stop. It's that girl." Joy recognized Samuel's voice, urgent and afraid. "What?" Another voice, deeper, annoyed. "Samuel, I have a 6 a.m. meeting. She's collapsed, sir. She's burning up with fever. Silence. Then footsteps approaching. Joy forced her eyes open and saw polished black shoes stopping inches from her face. Her gaze traveled upward. Expensive suit, sharp features, dark eyes staring down at her with an expression she couldn't read. The man from the car. The one who never looked at her. Please, Joy whispered, though she wasn't sure what she was begging for. Richard Daniels stood frozen, staring at the young woman sprawled on the concrete. Her skin glistened with fever sweat. Her lips were cracked and dry. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought, her face still holding traces of teenage softness beneath the grime and exhaustion. Sir, we need to call an ambulance, Samuel said. No. No ambulance. Richard's mind raced. An ambulance meant police reports, questions, complications. Put her in the car. There's a private clinic in Victoria Island. Dr. Ibrahim owes me a favor. Sir, are you sure? Now, Samuel. Samuel lifted Joy as carefully as he could. She moaned in pain, her head lolling against his shoulder. Richard opened the back door himself, then hesitated. The leather seats were pristine white. He shook his head, disgusted at himself for thinking about car seats when a girl was dying, and gestured for Samuel to put her inside. The drive to Victoria Island took 30 minutes through early morning traffic. Richard sat in the front passenger seat, refusing to look back at the girl murmuring deliriously behind him. Mama. I tried. I'm sorry, Daddy. The university. Her broken words twisted something in Richard's chest. Dr. Ibrahim met them at the clinic's private entrance, asking no questions. Within minutes, Joy was on an 4-drip, her fever being monitored. Severe malaria, Dr. Ibrahim confirmed. Another day and she might not have made it. Where did you find her? On the street, Richard said flatly. How long until she recovers? 3 days, maybe 4. She's malnourished too. I'll need to keep her here for observation. Richard pulled out his wallet. Whatever it costs. And Dr. Discretion would be appreciated. Dr. Ibrahim raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course. In the hallway, Samuel touched Richard's arm. Sir, that was a good thing you did. I just didn't want her dying on company property. The liability issues. Sir, with respect, you could have called the police or an ambulance. You didn't have to bring her to a private clinic. Richard said nothing. Should I wait to take you to your meeting? Samuel asked. Richard checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. No. Drop me at the office. Come back to check on her this afternoon. I want to know when she wakes up. Will you visit her, sir? No. Richard's voice was firm. This is a one-time thing, Samuel. Once she's well, she goes back to wherever she came from. Understood. Yes, sir. But as Richard sat through his morning meeting with the Singapore investors, he found his attention drifting. He kept seeing her face, fever-bright and desperate, whispering apologies to parents who could no longer hear. When the meeting ended, Mrs. Adeyemi cornered him in his office. Samuel told me what you did. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing to her. She handed him a file. The clinic called. She's stable. They found some identification in her bag. Her name is Joy Williams. 19 years old. Parents died in a road accident 6 months ago. Richard took the file but didn't open it. Why are you giving me this? Because you asked Samuel to check on her. Which means you care, whether you admit it or not. I don't care. He stopped, frustrated. I'm not a charity, Mrs. Adeyemi. No one said you were, sir. She headed for the door, then paused. But that girl has no one. When she wakes up and realizes someone helped her, it might give her something she hasn't had in months. Hope. After she left, Richard sat alone in his office, the unopened file on his desk. Joy Williams. 19. Orphaned. He thought about himself at 19, struggling to pay university fees, sleeping in his uncle's shop when he couldn't afford accommodation. If someone hadn't given him a chance back then, a professor who'd recommended him for a scholarship, a classmate who'd shared textbooks, where would he be? Richard opened the file and began to read. At the clinic, Joy's eyes fluttered open for the first time in 2 days. White ceiling. Soft bed. The beeping of machines. Where was she? A nurse noticed her stirring and smiled. Welcome back. How do you feel? What happened? You were very sick. Someone brought you here. You've been asleep for almost 3 days. Someone. Joy's voice cracked. Who? The nurse's smile was gentle but mysterious. Rest now. We can talk about that later. Joy wanted to ask more, but exhaustion pulled her back under. In her fever dreams, she saw black polished shoes and dark eyes staring down at her with an expression that might have been pity, or might have been something else entirely. Joy stood at the entrance of the glass building, her heart pounding. She'd been out of the clinic for a week now, and the question had consumed her every waking moment. Who had saved her? The nurses wouldn't tell her. Dr. Ibrahim had simply smiled and said, someone who wanted to remain anonymous. Samuel, the kind driver, had disappeared. She hadn't seen him at the building since her return. She had to know. Excuse me, she stopped a young man in a suit. Do you work here? He barely glanced at her. Yes. Can I help you? I'm looking for someone. A man who might have helped me when I was sick. Security handles charity cases. Talk to them. He walked away. Joy tried the security guard next, the one who usually chased her off. Please, I just want to know who took me to the hospital. The guard's face softened slightly. Look, girl, I don't know anything about that. But if someone helped you, maybe they wanted to stay unknown. You should respect that. For 3 days, Joy asked everyone she could. Office workers ignored her. Security guards told her to leave. The vendors on the street knew nothing. Finally, she gave up and returned to her usual spot across from the building, defeated. What she didn't know was that someone was watching her. Richard stood at his 7th-floor window, his jaw tight as he watched Joy approach yet another person on the street, only to be waved away. Still looking for her mysterious savior, Mrs. Adeyemi said behind him. Richard didn't turn around. How do you know that's what she's doing? Samuel told me. He's been watching out for her. I told him to stay out of it. You told him to check on her recovery. He took that seriously. She set a folder on his desk. The clinic's final bill. I had accounting process it as a charitable donation for tax purposes. Richard finally looked at the folder. The amount made him wince slightly, though it was barely a dent in his wealth. She's been asking about you, Mrs. Adeyemi said quietly. She doesn't know it was me. No, but she knows someone from this building helped her. She's trying to say thank you. She doesn't owe me anything. Mrs. Adeyemi studied him with those sharp eyes that had always made Richard uncomfortable. Sir, can I speak freely? When have I ever stopped you? I've worked for you for 4 years. In that time, I've watched you build an empire, but I've also watched you withdraw. After your divorce, you threw yourself into work. You barely sleep. You have no life outside this office. I don't see how that's relevant. That girl down there, Mrs. Adeyemi pointed at the window, she's fighting to survive every single day. And when someone showed her kindness, her first instinct was to find them and say thank you. She hasn't given up on human connection, despite everything she's lost. Richard was silent. Maybe she could teach you something about gratitude, or hope, or... She trailed off. Never mind. I've said too much. After she left, Richard sat at his desk, not working, just thinking. His phone rang. Samuel. Sir, I know you said to stay out of it, but I thought you should know. Joy is sleeping near the building again. And she's not well. I think the malaria might be coming back. Richard closed his eyes. Why are you telling me this? Because you saved her once. I thought you might want to know she needs help again. Samuel, I can't be her personal savior. I have a company to run. Yes, sir. I understand. A pause. My daughter asked about her yesterday. Wanted to know if the street sister was okay. I told her I didn't know. The guilt in Samuel's voice was obvious. After hanging up, Richard tried to focus on work. But his eyes kept drifting to the window, to the small figure across the street. At 7 p.m., he made a decision. He called Mrs. Adeyemi. Tomorrow, I want you to set up a meeting with Joy Williams. Sir. The girl. I want to speak with her. But not here. Somewhere neutral. A cafe, perhaps. May I ask why the change of heart? No, you may not. But his voice was softer. Just arrange it. And Mrs. Adeyemi? Don't tell her who requested the meeting. Just say someone wants to discuss possible opportunities for her. Understood, sir. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Mrs. Adeyemi had said, about how Joy hadn't given up on human connection. When had he given up on it? After Melissa left? Or had it been earlier, when he'd climbed so high that everyone below seemed too far away to matter? The next morning, Mrs. Adeyemi found Joy near the building. Excuse me, are you Joy Williams? Joy turned, wary. Yes. Why? Someone has been watching your situation. They'd like to meet with you to discuss possible help. Are you interested? Joy's eyes widened. Who? Is it the person who took me to the hospital? Mrs. Adeyemi smiled mysteriously. Why don't you come and find out? Tomorrow, 10 a.m., at the cafe 2 blocks from here. Don't be late. As Mrs. Adeyemi walked away, Joy stood frozen, hope and fear warring in her chest. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she would finally get answers. What she didn't know was that the man who'd saved her was just as nervous about their meeting as she was, and that both their lives were about to change in ways neither could predict. Joy woke up before dawn, but not because of habit this time. Today was her 20th birthday. She sat against the wall of the building, wrapped in the thin blanket Samuel had given her after she left the clinic, and let the tears come. 2 years ago, her parents had thrown her a party. Nothing fancy, just jollof rice, meat pies, and her mother's special chocolate cake. Her father had given her a calculator, grinning. For my future accountant. Now both of them were gone. The party, the dreams, the future, all gone. Joy wiped her eyes and looked up at the dark sky. Mama, Daddy, she whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't make you proud. I'm sorry I ended up here. She pulled out her phone, the dead, useless thing she carried like a talisman, and looked at the last photo she'd taken with them. Her mother's arm around her shoulder, her father's hand on her head. They'd been going to church that Sunday. Hours later, they'd be dead. The grief felt fresh again, sharp and overwhelming. Joy began to sing, softly at first, then louder. It was the song her mother used to sing when Joy was sad as a child, a Yoruba lullaby about stars and hope and tomorrow. She didn't notice the light come on in the 7th floor window above her. Richard had been working late again, avoiding the empty house waiting for him in Lekki. When he heard the singing, faint but clear, he walked to the window. There she was. Joy. The girl he was supposed to meet tomorrow at the cafe. But something about the way she sat, shoulders shaking between verses, made him pause. She was crying. Richard stood there for over an hour, listening to her sing and cry and sing again. The melody was beautiful, haunting. It spoke of loss and longing, of a pain so deep it had no bottom. And suddenly, Richard was 15 again, sitting in his uncle's dark shop after his father had beaten him for failing a mathematics test. His mother had sung that same song, or one very like it, holding him while he cried, promising him that one day he'd rise above all this poverty and pain. She'd been right. He had risen. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten what it felt like to hurt like this. To be alone with your grief, singing to parents who couldn't answer. Richard picked up his phone and called Samuel. Sir. Samuel's voice was thick with sleep. It's past midnight. I know. I need you to do something for me. Can you get a cake? A small one. And some food. Real food, not leftovers. Sir, it's midnight. Everything is closed. There's an all-night bakery in Suralere. I know the owner. Tell him it's for me. He'll open up. May I ask what this is for? Richard watched Joy wipe her eyes, still singing. Just do it, Samuel. And bring them to the building. Don't go home tonight. Park in the garage and wait for my call. An hour later, Samuel texted, I have everything, sir. Richard stood at the window, hands in his pockets, watching Joy curl up beneath her blanket. He could go down there right now. Give her the cake himself. Talk to her face to face. But fear held him back. What would he say? How would he explain why he'd helped her? He didn't even understand it himself. Instead, he called Samuel again. Take the food and cake down to her. Don't tell her it's from me. Just tell her someone wanted her to have a good birthday. You know it's her birthday, sir? Richard didn't answer that. Just do it, Samuel. He watched from the window as Samuel approached Joy. She sat up, startled, as Samuel set down a box and a bag. Happy birthday, Joy, Samuel said, loud enough for Richard to hear through the slightly open window. How did you know? Joy's voice cracked. Someone told me. Someone who cares. Who? Please, Samuel, I've been trying to find out. I can't say. But they wanted you to have this. Samuel opened the box, revealing a small cake with a single candle already lit. Make a wish. From his window, Richard watched Joy stare at the cake, tears streaming down her face. She closed her eyes, whispered something, and blew out the candle. Samuel handed her the bag of food and quietly walked away. Joy sat alone, holding the cake box, crying so hard her whole body shook. But Richard noticed something else. She was smiling too. A broken, grateful smile that made his chest ache. He turned away from the window, unable to watch anymore. Mrs. Adeyemi had been right. Joy hadn't given up on hope, on gratitude, on believing that good people still existed. And somehow, that belief was starting to crack open something in Richard he'd thought died 2 years ago when Melissa left. The ability to feel, to care, to connect. He sat at his desk and did something he hadn't done in years. He cried. For Joy. For his younger self. For all the pain and loneliness both of them had carried alone. When he finally composed himself, he made a decision. Tomorrow's meeting at the cafe wasn't going to be enough. A one-time conversation wouldn't solve anything. If he was going to help Joy, really help her, he needed to do it right. He picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in months. Richard. His mother's voice was surprised. It's 2 a.m. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Mama. I need to ask you something. When I was young and struggling, who were the people who helped you and Papa believe I could make it? His mother was quiet for a moment. Why this question now? Just answer, please. There was your teacher, Mr. Johnson, and Pastor Williams at church, and Mrs. Obi next door who gave us food when we had nothing. They didn't just give us money, Richard. They gave us hope. They made us feel seen. How do I do that for someone, Mama? How do I make someone feel seen without making them feel like a charity case? Yes. His mother's voice softened. You treat them like a person first. You don't save them, son. You walk beside them. There's a difference. After hanging up, Richard looked out the window one last time. Joy was eating the cake slowly, savoring each bite like it was precious. And Richard realized that tomorrow's meeting wasn't about him offering her help. It was about him learning to see someone beyond the glass walls of his tower. Someone who might teach him how to be human again. The cafe meeting never happened. At 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Joy was supposed to arrive, Richard got a frantic call from Samuel. "Sir, there's trouble. Brutus and his gang. They have Joy cornered in the alley behind the building. They're angry about something. I tried to intervene but I'm coming down." Richard was already moving. "Don't engage with them. Stay back." He ran for the elevator, his heart pounding. Mrs. Adeyemi called after him, confused, but he didn't stop. When he burst out of the building and rounded the corner to the alley, he saw them. 4 young men surrounding Joy, who stood with her back against the wall. One of them, Brutus, Richard assumed, held the blanket Samuel had given her. "You think you're better than us?" Brutus was saying. "Sleeping in our territory, taking handouts from rich people while acting too good to work with us?" "I don't want trouble," Joy said, her voice steady despite her fear. "Just give me back the blanket and I'll leave." "You'll leave when we say you can leave." Another boy stepped closer. "Maybe you need to learn some respect." "That's enough." Richard's voice cut through the alley like a whip. All heads turned. Brutus's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" "Someone you don't want to mess with." "Let her go." Brutus laughed. "Look at this one. Big man in his suit thinks he can give us orders." Samuel appeared behind Richard, breathing hard. "Sir, please, let me handle." "Stay back, Samuel." Richard walked forward, his eyes never leaving Brutus. Years of poverty in Ajigunal had taught him something that no boardroom ever could: how to face down a threat without flinching. "You have 3 seconds to walk away," Richard said quietly. "After that, I call the police. And unlike street justice, they won't just chase you. They'll arrest you. Your families will have to come bail you out. Is that what you want?" For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brutus threw the blanket on the ground and spat. "This isn't over." He jerked his head at his crew. "Let's go." They swaggered off, but Richard saw the fear beneath their bravado. They were just kids, really. Kids who'd chosen the wrong path because no one had shown them another way. Joy picked up her blanket, hands shaking. "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but are you hurt?" Richard cut her off, his voice sharper than he intended. "No, I'm fine. They just wanted to scare me." "They did more than scare you." Richard noticed the bruise forming on her wrist where one of them had grabbed her. "Samuel, take her to Dr. Ibrahim. Have him check." "No." Joy stepped back. "I'm fine. I don't need a doctor." "You're injured. I've had worse." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Richard really looked at her in daylight. 19 years old but with eyes that had seen too much. Scared but not broken. Vulnerable but still fighting. Samuel groaned behind them. Richard turned and saw his driver leaning against the wall, holding his side. "Samuel." Joy rushed over. "You're hurt. One of them pushed me into the wall when I tried to help you." "It's nothing." But Richard saw the way Samuel was breathing, shallow and pained. Possible broken ribs. "We're going to the hospital. Both of you." "Sir, I'm fine." "That's an order, Samuel." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my car service." While they waited, Joy knelt beside Samuel, her hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I just left when they first warned me." "Don't apologize," Samuel said firmly. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Richard watched the exchange, saw the genuine care between them. Samuel had befriended this girl when Richard had ordered him to ignore her. Samuel had seen her humanity when Richard had only seen a security problem. At the hospital, Dr. Ibrahim confirmed Samuel's ribs were bruised but not broken. While Samuel was being treated, Richard found himself alone in the waiting room with Joy. She sat 3 chairs away, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm day. "You're the one who paid for my treatment, aren't you?" she said suddenly. Richard didn't answer. "And the cake. And the food." Samuel said someone who cares, but he wouldn't say who. She looked at him directly. It was you. Still, Richard said nothing. Joy stood up and walked over, stopping right in front of him. Why? Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. I'm nobody to you. Richard met her eyes. You're not nobody. Then what am I? The question hung in the air between them. What was she? A reminder of his own past? A charity case? A responsibility he hadn't asked for? No. She was a person. A strong, brave person who defended Samuel despite being outnumbered. Who'd cried over a birthday cake but kept fighting to survive. Who'd lost everything but hadn't lost herself. You're someone who deserves a chance, Richard finally said. Tears filled Joy's eyes. I don't understand. People don't just help for no reason. I'm not helping for no reason. Richard's voice was rough with emotion he hadn't felt in years. I'm helping because I was you once. Sleeping in my uncle's shop. Going to school hungry. Watching other people's lives and wondering why mine had to be so hard. Joy wiped her eyes. What changed for you? People believed in me. Gave me opportunities. Helped me see that my circumstances didn't define my worth. He paused. I want to do that for you. If you'll let me. I'm not a charity case. I know you're not. Richard actually smiled. A real smile that felt strange on his face. You're too stubborn for that. Joy laughed through her tears. When Samuel came out, bandaged and moving gingerly, he saw them sitting together, talking quietly. He smiled to himself. Richard Daniels had finally stepped out of his tower. And Joy Williams had finally found someone who saw her not as a problem or a victim, but as exactly what she was, a person worth knowing. The question was, what happened next? Richard sat across from Mrs. Adeyemi in his office, the social worker's report open between them. She has no living relatives willing to help, Mrs. Adeyemi summarized. The uncle's family refuses to acknowledge her. Legally, she's an adult, so there's no foster care option. She's essentially on her own. What are her options? Richard asked. Government housing, if she can get on the list. But that could take years. Social services can help with food vouchers, but she'd still need income for rent, clothing, everything else. Richard was quiet for a long moment. What if I offered her a job? Mrs. Adeyemi raised an eyebrow. What kind of job? Internship. Entry level. She could work and complete her education at the same time. Sir, you can't just. Why not? We have internship programs. She's intelligent, hardworking. She wants to be an accountant. We have an accounting department. That's not the point. Mrs. Adeyemi's voice was gentle but firm. You can't save her just because you feel guilty about your own past. This has to be about her, not about you. Richard knew she was right. He'd spent the last 3 weeks since the alley incident thinking about exactly that. Set up a meeting, he finally said. A real one this time. I want to talk to her about possibilities. But I want to hear what she wants first. Her dreams, her goals. This can't be me imposing my solution on her life. The meeting happened 2 days later in a neutral location. A small restaurant in Yoba, not the cafe where they'd originally planned to meet. Joy arrived early, wearing a borrowed dress from Mom and Ngozi. She'd washed her hair, cleaned her face, but couldn't hide the nervousness in her eyes. Richard arrived exactly on time. When Joy saw him walk through the door, her eyes widened. You're the CEO. The one from the building. Richard Daniels. He extended his hand. And you're Joy Williams. The young woman who's been sleeping outside my building for months. They shook hands, then sat. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Joy broke the silence. Why did you help me? I told you. Because I was you once. But why keep helping? The hospital, the cake, stopping those boys. You could have just walked away after the first time. Richard considered his answer carefully. When I was 19, I was living in my uncle's shop, studying under streetlights because we couldn't afford electricity. A professor saw me one day and asked why I studied there. I told him the truth. He didn't pity me. He challenged me. Said if I was serious about changing my life, he'd help me find scholarship opportunities. But I had to do the work. Did you? Every day. 4 years. And slowly, things changed. Richard leaned forward. Joy, I don't want to save you. I want to give you the same thing that Professor gave me, a chance to save yourself. Joy's hands trembled as she clasped them together. What kind of chance? Tell me about your dreams first. What did you want before your parents died? I wanted to be an accountant. Work for a big company, maybe start my own firm one day. Her voice grew stronger as she talked. I loved mathematics, loved how numbers tell stories about businesses. My father said I had a gift for it. Richard pulled out a folder. Here's my offer. It's not charity, and it comes with expectations. An internship position in our accounting department. You'll work during the day, attend evening classes at the university. I have contacts who can help arrange delayed admission. The internship pays enough for you to rent a small place, cover your needs. Joy stared at the folder, not touching it. Why would you do this for me? Because you remind me that money isn't the only thing that makes someone rich. You've been living on the streets for months, and you never once stole, never hurt anyone, never gave up on being a good person. That takes a strength I'd forgotten existed. Tears spilled down Joy's cheeks. What if I fail? What if I can't do it? Then we figure it out together. But Joy, I've watched you survive impossible circumstances with dignity and courage. If you can do that, you can do anything. Joy finally opened the folder. Inside was an internship contract, university application forms, and a letter of recommendation from Richard himself. I don't know what to say. Say you'll try. That's all I ask. Joy looked up at him, her face streaked with tears but transformed by hope. I'll try. I'll work harder than anyone. I promise. I know you will. They shook hands again, and this time, it felt like a partnership, not charity. 6 months later, Richard stood at the back of the conference room, watching Joy present her first financial report to the department heads. She was nervous. He could see her hands shaking as she clicked through the slides, but her voice was clear and confident. In conclusion, the Q3 projections show a 15% increase in operational efficiency if we implement these cost-saving measures. Mrs. Adeyemi leaned over to Richard. She's impressive. She is. You did a good thing, sir. Richard shook his head. No. I gave her an opportunity. She's the one who turned it into something real. After the presentation, Joy found Richard in the hallway. How did I do? You were brilliant. The CFO wants to meet with you next week about joining the team permanently after your internship ends. Joy's eyes widened. Really? Really? Richard smiled. You earned it, Joy. She threw her arms around him in an impulsive hug, then immediately stepped back, embarrassed. Sorry, sir. That was unprofessional. It's fine. Richard's voice was thick with emotion. You know what? For the first time in 2 years, I actually feel like I'm doing something that matters. Not just making money, but actually making a difference. You saved my life, Mr. Daniels. No, Richard said firmly. You saved your own life. You just needed someone to believe you could do it. They stood there in the hallway, two people who'd been broken by different circumstances but had somehow helped each other become whole again. Joy looked out the window at the Lagos skyline, at the city that had almost destroyed her but had also given her a second chance. My parents would have been proud, she whispered. They would have been, Richard agreed. And Joy, they'd be right to be proud. You didn't just survive. You're thriving. As Joy walked back to her desk in the accounting department, Richard stood at the window, watching the streets below where he'd first seen her sleeping in the rain. He thought about the man he'd been 6 months ago, isolated, bitter, buried in work to avoid feeling anything. And he thought about the man he was becoming, someone who understood that true success wasn't measured in profit margins, but in the lives you touched, the hope you gave, the human connections you built. Joy had taught him that. A homeless girl with nothing but her dignity and her dreams had taught a wealthy CEO what it meant to be truly rich. And that, Richard thought, was the best investment he'd ever made. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reach out to someone who's struggling. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a meal, a kind word, a chance, can change everything. We all have the power to see the invisible, to help the hurting, to believe in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. Subscribe to Folktales by Inoya for more stories that remind us of our shared humanity. And remember, you might be the miracle someone is praying for.